Let's start with introducing ourselves. I'm Julie from VRUnicorns. I'm a game developer. I made my first VR game 4 years ago on a DK1 that I stole from the Unity office in Copenhagen. So I didn't tell anyone, so Unity actually thought it was really stolen. And I went to a conference where I showed my first VR game exactly 4 years ago. And I showcased it myself 8 hours a day alone. And that was great experience. I know how to demo games, and I don't feel like I ever have to do that again in public, because that's crazy. It was back when VR was not available to anyone, which meant that everyone wanted to try VR, and I had a 2-hour line, and people got angry if people got to play for too long time, and it was fun. But that was, I didn't know anything about VR development. I didn't know anything about how to make games. I just hacked away in Unity, did my best. I'm pretty shit at everything. But those days were really good sort of learning experiences. And now, part of VRUnicorns, and I guess we'll mention our games later on. I want you to tell what you're up to now, because you changed recently. Yes, you changed.
Yeah. Hello. So Nizar, Romdan, CEO and co-founder at TheVirtualReport.biz. We are a virtual reality and augmented reality startup based in Cambridge in the UK. We are 9 months old. It takes almost the same time to have a baby. And we're about to release our first game, mobile VR game on Oculus VR. Before this, I was working for ARM, the processor company, and I was running developer relations, so my job was to work with game developers to help them get the job done on mobile, on ARM processors. And I decided to switch side and become a game developer and try my luck. So spotted VR, I guess, like everyone else, and then just jumped ship, and here I am.
I'm Horatiu. I'm also part of VRUnicorns. I'm doing all the dirty work, coding and
all the actual work. I only
development.
talk, right?
Also some 3D lately and some tutorials on Twitter. It's great. It's going great.
So until Horatiu joined the team, I was the only coder, and I'm really, really bad.
Yeah, I think I joined the team about the time where you stole the DK2s from Unity, or those were already from Valve?
No, I got them directly from Oculus, actually. They started sending me equipment, so I didn't have to steal anymore.
No, not Valve. Yeah. Definitely not Valve.
That was later. I stole from Valve, that's true.
Yeah, and I made a game called Drunken Johnny just before we met. But it was after we met, but before we started working together. It was a ragdoll guy with a camera on his head, and you're drunk and trying to get home, and you're falling down, and you're puking in the game, and it was great.
I puked in real life when I played it.
Yeah, nobody could really play it, so.
Except for you.
But it was fun, yeah. I got hurt to get me on the team with that, I think.
And told you not to ever do that again.
Yeah. And then we started VRUnicorns, 2 years ago. Been working on it, traveling the world. It's been great, jamming. I'm a game jammer.
We're all game jammers and VRUnicorns. That's how we
like making quick and dirty stuff that is funny, and then we make it into real games.
Yeah, and that takes a long time.
That takes longer than jamming, unfortunately. But yeah.
And hi, I'm Bob Heubel. I'm with Immersion, and I'm a little bit different than everybody else on the panel here, where I don't make VR games, but I work with all the VR developers for the UX side of it. So how a game should feel. Our company does haptics. So that experience of feeling what you're interacting with is really kind of a new territory in VR, and trying to help developers figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and I'm Daniel, a game designer and coder and producer and a bunch of other things at Survive. Also co-organizing Stockholm VR meetup for a couple of years now, and been also doing VR consultancy. As with the VRUnicorn guys, it's been quite a journey to this point in time, as far as VR developments goes.
And you're a game jammer too.
Yeah,
yeah.
We met there. Was it 4 years ago? No?
Yeah, it was when we did the Stockholm Vive Jam.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we did the Copenhagen Vive Jam afterwards. Yeah. We were like super fortunate, and VRUnicorns, we the first Vive in Denmark. It was given to us, which was really nice, but it also meant that we were the only ones having a Vive, so everyone came to our offices. Oh, but what was great in that regard was that we came straight from working on the DK2 from Oculus and with a gamepad, because like move controllers were a bit flaky sometimes, we couldn't really use them. And when we got the Vive, we realized that the sort of hashtag deep dark horror game called Ragnarok VR that we actually like joined team to work on back then. That was a game that I had started 4 years ago. It didn't really work out when you were in full room scale and you just wanted to have fun, because like if you're just standing and like everything is supposed to be depressing and you're getting scared and whatnot, was just not interesting anymore, because we had the Vive and we would be running around and
every mechanic we were making, we just made fun of it and had fun. And okay, this doesn't really work for Ragnarok, so maybe we should use it.
So we actually ended up doing all these like crazy semi-sports game jammy things, and one day we were sitting and working on Ragnarok, and I look at Horatiu's screen, and we're 4 people sitting in the office working. I look at Horatiu's screen. He's not working on Ragnarok. He's setting up a tennis court. I'm just like, what the fuck? All right. Anyways, like, I'm not a great manager. I've never been, and I didn't tell you off for that.
Great manager.
I'm a great manager.
That's why great manager.
Exactly. So, and in the end, he says, we'd had like a fun session the night before. We were like pitching ideas around, like just like yelling out weird game names at each other. And turns out that what Horatiu was sitting and working on was actually the game that we launched with the Vive, selfie tennis. So in the evening, he said, Julie, you want to play tennis with yourself? I'm like, yeah. And we just like shortly after dropped the actual game that we'd been working on for several years. And then suddenly we were making semi-realistic sports games. And we're still in that path, both with archery, selfie tennis, ski jump that we're launching soon. And that's like how we ended up here. And sort of my reason for saying this is that VR, because it's been a crazy ride, and especially as game jammers, we've been part of it since very early on. It doesn't like you plan out to do something and then you end up changing everything and do something completely different, and you realize it's way more fun or way more interesting or way more marketable. And I think like that's one of the things that we should like focus on today, is what we actually learned like throughout these years and how we ended up being where we are right now. Especially like you and I, we were suits. Like we were doing business before. That's why we know each other. We're business people. No, but then suddenly we ended up being game developers. What happened then? So Bob, since you're more like from the other side and not actually working on games like the rest of us, I would like your perspective, because I'm so deep-rooted into actually being a game developer.
Yeah,
but what have you learned?
You're talking really deep into your games, and so yeah, that is different for me. So I've been at a lot of developer shops, folks that are developing for the home environment and launching on Steam, that sort of stuff, but also for location-based entertainment, which is completely different, and talking to folks like The Void and what they're doing. And you've got the home controllers, which are, you've got the touch and you've got the Vive and stuff, but then you have these specialty controllers. You've got the fun stuff. I think it's fun stuff. You've got the guns and you got the vests and you got the gloves that are all in development.
We don't like guns.
You don't like guns? Well, no. It doesn't.
They're boring.
When you feel the recoil of a gun,
I like amazing. Guns, Horatiu. It's just you who doesn't like guns. But I don't want to make a game with guns, just to correct.
But one thing that
like
is...
a vibrator, shortly.
One thing that's the same with all the developers is that they get the VR. Like there's a passion about it. Yeah. And when somebody puts on a VR headset and they try out your game, there's a wow. There's always a wow. But there's also, they want to move. They want to move immediately. And some games you're not supposed to move around in, but we want to interact as well. And it's difficult right now to figure out, there's no recipe for the way things are supposed to feel. And the Vive feels different than the Oculus Touch versus the PlayStation. There's no kind of language for it.
Yeah, because it's like there's no standard right now, which is a thing that I've been talking about.
And that's what you're talking
throughout the years. Because the problem as a developer is that we're still developing 2 different devices, right? Like there's no standard. SteamVR created a standard, then unfortunately if you want to ship on Oculus Store, then you can't use SteamVR. Like just that fact that you have to use another SDK, and the same thing if you're developing for console, that's a barrier for a game developer. And then of course, yeah, the controller controllers are different. Like, I am completely in love with the Vive controllers because we also do games where you actually have like a tennis racket, you have a bow and arrow, and you have various tools in your hand where it feels good to have like a big controller in your hand. Whereas I know a lot of people are very much in love with the Oculus Touch controllers, probably people who prefer also playing on gamepads versus keyboard and whatnot. Like, honestly, just you can quote me on this. I still feel like the Oculus Touch controller is like tiny sex toys, and they feel kind of fragile. Whereas with a Vive controller, you can actually like feel you have something in your hand, and I'm not worried about smashing things. And we smashed a lot of controllers. But yeah, just a fact that we have to develop for different controls is of course complicated when you're designing a game and you just want it to actually just work really well on a standardized controller.
And we never know where it's going to end up either. Like we start development in something, and then 6 months later you have a completely different hardware ecosystem with completely different setups and other SDKs that are new. So it's constantly changing, and throughout development, that's one of the things why we have to be fast in developing things, because if we're not, we're going to be releasing on a system or a console or platform that's not relevant anymore when release comes.
Yeah. But even if the stuff is changing so fast, it's very good to develop for the device that you're going to play on and use the affordances of that device rather than create something generic that maybe works on all the different devices, but then it's just a very diluted version of what could be there. Like I was talking yesterday with some of the old Minefield developers that were making a game for PC and VR, and they offered various different types of locomotion in the game, and that ended up with mechanics that work on every version of the game, which meant you pick up objects and you look at them, and that was the game. And you move around in the game world. And okay, you know, it's point-and-click adventure in a way, but if you've developed for the Vive, and you can use the physicality of the device, maybe it's not even going to fit with the Oculus, but maybe that's fine, because you're going to have a game that feels really good for the Vive. And one of the first things that we did with Milan, our designer who we worked together on Selfie Tennis, when we got the Vive controllers, the new ones with the hole in it, we made a game where we ran with the unicorn horn and we had to stick it in the hole of the controllers. We started using the devices, the hole, as a game mechanic. That was so good. And it's nice to use the specific things about the controller.
No, you're very much right about that. And with the VR controllers, it's got an affordance that you don't have if you're on PC, right? You know, if you've got like a rumble pad, when you've got two controllers, you've got that left and right going on. There's so much more that you can do.
Yeah. You get such detailed feedback on anything that you do.
And
it's super
if you're
important.
dumbing it down to just work on every platform out there.
The problem is you end up making the, honestly, like, and that's talking specific games, but it's kind of like if you're in an argument and you just settle on like a compromise. And it's the same thing if you try to make a game that works on old devices, and you just end up making a less interesting game, right? And I think like one of the things throughout my years in VR, and also I like, again, I don't have a game development background. I just threw myself into it, and so I had no, like, I didn't follow any rules, any design rules were not. I just tried to make something, I tested it on people, got their feedback, and then tried to change it for the better. And it means, like, and that's also very much our approach with our games and how we're working, and that's also why we have no fixed design plans, we have no fixed production schedules, we're completely chaotic, and we're like, past launch dates all the time, and we're really messy, but we end up making games that are really interesting, at least for us to play, and also way better than if we had followed like strict design rules.
I remember the old Oculus design rule handbook, and they had all the different do not play standing or something. In the beginning, the Oculus didn't want us to play standing.
I got so told
Sit the player because you're getting motion sick if you stand. So you can only play while standing.
I can only play standing because I get motion sick from just like.
So it was super useful to read that and decide, okay, let's try to do all the things that they're telling us not to do and see what happens. And some of them worked, some of them were right, and it ended up in us creating mechanics that we didn't expect would work. And that was so much better. And it's good to test the forbidden stuff. But it's also obviously good to not do it when it turns out it's bad. Like,
I remember
literally
being told off by Oculus for letting people play standing, and I'm like, guys, I don't let them play standing, they get motion sick, and I can't play test my own game if I don't stand up. So we like literally, I just had a rule: you always move in the direction you're facing, like no strafing, no nothing, because people puke, and that's one of my main things that my main role, I think, in VRUnicorns is make sure that I don't puke from our games, because
and I broke that rule too with the flying mechanic.
Yes.
You can move sideways too, and it's
fine.
Oh
yeah, you break my rules all the time. But it's always like working up against like what you can actually create, and then make sure that it's comfortable. Like that's how we do it. Yeah, don't make people sick. Like 2 of my friends, they were here since morning. They had a lot of meetings, and they both had a demo where they got so sick that they almost puke, and it just messes you up for the rest of the day. That's like my rule number 1 in VR: just don't make people sick. Like, it's awful, and no one's gonna like your game anyways.
Yeah, and that's about the only rule that has been sticking all this time. Just don't make people sick. Make people enjoy this medium and these kind of games and the experiences that we're all making.
Although people still doing it, and they can also be successful just for a small part of the market. Look at Onward. We can't play it.
We can play it.
But there's a lot of people playing it day to day, and it's doing really well, so good for them. But
I mean, there's some people who are not prone to motion sickness, and that's cool. And of course, that's a market too. And there are people who actually like having various locomotion mechanics where, like, most people won't be able to play it. I can't play it, and I think I've taken off quite a few headsets. And then Chet from Valve actually taught me a great lesson at one point. He's just, if people want to demo you something where you're about to get sick, just close your eyes. So that's what I do. Like, if I'm forced to try something where I'm about to puke, I literally just close my eyes, and I'm standing, yeah, great. Like, this is a puke simulator, please don't do it. But at least I won't suffer the rest of the day.
I've got a good experience for that.
Yeah.
So it was actually 2 years, I think it might have been 2 years here at the show. There was a table that had a VR experience of a roller coaster. How many have tried roller coaster VR? Yeah, right? So I go up to try this thing out. Never tried it before, and it's a standing demo. And they said, go ahead, put this on, and there was a bar in front to hold on to. And I said, well, I'm not getting on a roller coaster. I don't need to hold on to that. And they said, oh, yes, you need to hold on to it.
I avoided that for that reason. Like,
oh, so it starts, and I find myself white knuckle holding on to this thing, feeling all these forces, and it's like you said, it gets to be too much, you close your eyes. And all that feeling of motion went away. Just like that. It was scary. I had to hold on.
So you have to trick the brain to make it work. And you can do that in many ways, and it's interesting to find out, and you can only do it through experimenting. And I guess you said you're not developing, but you are consulting and going around and trying out different stuff. What do you tell people how to approach developing and making it feel better?
Well, it's funny because that kind of feeling, that center of mass feeling, that real, your mind, it's like 80% of that motion, it's all visual. That's why you can just kind of close your eyes and the feeling goes away. I like to think about how can you use that in a game, because it's a pseudo haptics. It's not the vibration from the controller, but maybe you can use that to even help combat motion sickness in a way. If you could figure out how to push and pull people a little bit without putting them over the edge of going, oh my God, I got to hold on to something.
Yeah. Well, like that's what we do in ski jump, right? We're pushing it up against like the actual.
When you let players control their movement, in some ways it doesn't work also, but as long as you control the movement, there's a good chance it's going to be less motion sickening.
Yeah, but what we found out was that it's all about triggering the player's brain, right? So it's triggering the player's brain to think that it is the player controlling every movement. And we're really pushing, like with ski jump, which has like, you're skiing downhill, right? So it should make your motion sick. And we're worked on ski jump for almost 2 years now, but a lot of our work is going into like the actual core mechanic, making sure that I don't get sick and other people won't get sick because of that. But it's all about how to trick your brain to think that you're the one causing the motion. And we figured out, like, actually, when big finding we found out last summer, because we were arguing a lot back then whether we should have ski sticks in or not. And I forced ski sticks in when you were on holiday because I knew you were not going to allow it. So I got one of the other guys to give me the exact ski sticks I wanted, which meant it was like really hard to play the game, and you had to you were really exercising while doing it. But it meant that I would not get motion sick because I was causing all the locomotion myself. Like all movements was me who had started it. So this whole thing about you triggering the brain to think that you're actually the one controlling every movement in the game, like that's super important.
It's worth noting another locomotion mechanic that we love. It's the Ponycorn. You have a horse on a stick,
it's called a hobby
and you
horse
jump
in
on
English,
it.
but I call it
And when you
Ponycorn.
jump, you move, and you move forward in the game, but at the same time as you move with your whole body. So
you know,
it
it's an
totally
actual
works.
sport in Finland.
It is. Yeah, I saw
You
some
guys
news
know
about
it?
it. It's
Have you
ridiculous.
seen it? Yeah. Okay.
I like it.
So it's literally it's called kæphest in Danish, and I didn't know the English word for it. So one day we were caught in the office, and there was crazy rain, lightning, or not, and I just shouted at Horatiu like, "We should have a kæphest," and he's like, "What is that?" "Ponycorn." And I Google it and I show him, and he's like, "Sure, Julie." And then he actually implemented it, and you're literally jumping around in our games like on a Ponycorn, and that's an excellent locomotion mechanic because you don't get sick. You're causing all the motion yourself. We worked a lot on it, but we actually made that for another game.
It's a bit tiresome, so we didn't really use it for any proper, like you have to move in a game. It's kind of just for fun right now, but it has some potential for smaller spaces where it's still bigger than room scale. And for longer distances, you need different stuff.
Yeah.
But it's something I always bring up in locomotion panels or discussions. How we always talk about how could we allow the player to walk in long distances more than the room scale. But let's say through some physical contraption or whatever, you could walk forever in VR with your physical body, just walk forever. Would you still want to do it? Wouldn't it be kind of stupid to make a huge world and you have to walk? Now I have to work to get to the castle and then find something, come back. Shit, I forgot my. Oh, come on.
That depends.
So I want to fly. I want to do all the different weird stuff that you can only do in VR that you can't do in real life. Maybe we might as well skip that step and go to the crazy stuff directly.
Depends, because we can look at non-VR stuff to see how they are figuring out in even Skyrim, Breath of the Wild, these huge open world games. They have moments where you can just get off your high-speed velocity locomotion and just walk around and have this world of moments. But at the same time, when you need to go somewhere very far, you have fast travel. And you don't just need, or you don't have to just have one option in your games. We can have several. Be able to have this moment-to-moment gameplay where you really need to bend down, pick up a flower in a field somewhere out in nowhere, or
But
you can...
If some people can't play one of the options, then it's not really an option for them. So then you only dilute the mechanics, and then they can't play half of the game or something. So
I'm saying options that
that
complement each other, not separate options.
Yeah, so you still have to design the game for every option, and
But that's part of the game design.
It's good to have different options, and it's cool.
Do you have something to add?
Yeah, sorry.
From our perspective, our learners regarding the platforms, we decided to focus only on mobile, avoid the PC and console platforms. In terms of control, avoiding making people feel sick, a lot of people go first person or third person behind the character or the object. We decided to go third person, but quite far. So side view or even quite high elevated view.
Like bird.
VR doesn't have to be first person or third person. It's like if you go and watch a game, football game, you don't have to be the player or the referee. There are 80,000 people sitting, watching, enjoying the game, and probably that's why they're paying. So you can have a view where you don't have to be right in the middle where things are happening. And the other thing we found that if you give a fixed reference point, then it will help a lot reduce motion sickness. In our case, our first game is a car racing game, and we decided actually to make everything kind of move but the car. So the car is really in the middle and the side track, and that's the fixed point. The track moves, and in the beginning you think, actually, that's going to make you feel sick, and somehow it doesn't, because the player is constantly focusing on the car, trying to control it, and it does help. Of course, we don't move the whole thing super fast, so these are a bit our experiments.
Can I give a short example of what we tried in ski jump? So we had a skier in the office.
Yeah, I was out of the office.
And he really skied. None of us ski, so that's why we're making a ski game. But
the sports we make games about.
So I asked him, how do you ski? And he suggested, okay, well, you have to lean, and then you turn to the side where you lean, because you do it all from the feet. And say, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the player. Okay, that was puke simulation instantly. Even I got sick, and I never get sick. And then I said, okay, I need a fixed reference point. Maybe the skier doesn't move. I let the skybox be static, and I just turn the level around, because then you have the fixed reference point around. It's basically like a cockpit, but it's around the level. And then you're kind of like in the old school games where the car is always flat and the whole racetrack moves. Man, I got so emotional. It was even worse than the first one, because you got so confused by the fact that the sky was moving the opposite direction.
I remember coming back.
I don't think you even tried it because it was so bad.
You told me what you guys had been doing. Yeah. So I had a lot of hospital stuff the past year.
So that's amazing.
I had a lot of hospital stuff the past years. I was in and out of the office. So sometimes I would come back and they would be like, "What did you do? All right, let me try it." But I remember that one instantly. I'm like, "No."
Yeah. So I think it's possible to make a game for some people, and then others won't be able to play it. But I just don't think it's very nice.
Should we do questions now? You guys have questions? I hope so. No? It's like, no question. Yeah, you're getting a mic. It came right there.
Yep, thank you. So yeah, I have one small question. We are also a VR developer ourselves, and we very often meet concerns from parents, for example, or just from players about how VR can affect, eyes. Is it safe for eyes, and is it somehow can harm, eyes development, like in case of children playing VR? So just wanted to know what you think about that, and how you are dealing with such kind of questions, and if there are any new studies on that.
So I remember when Oculus actually had this warning screen. I don't know whether they still do, but I remember when it was added to the SDK, and I tried to get rid of it because it said that if you were under the age of 13, you shouldn't play VR. And I have a lot of kids in the family, so they are our main play testers. I tried to get rid of that. I myself, as like me physically, I have an autoimmune disease that also affects my eyes. So I have problems with my eyes already, and I can so sometimes I have to wear glasses in VR. I prefer not to, but if my eyes are really bad, I have to wear glasses. I have no idea whether VR has influenced anything. I have a friend who also has an autoimmune disease, and she's certain that it's because we're in virtual reality that we all got sick. But I don't know of any research that is backing it up with regards to eyes. But
actually, it's the other way. There's been more research saying that those kind of claims are false. Even from the early 90s, don't stare too close to the TV kind of things. It doesn't happen as severely. I can't quote the source because I've seen it in passing. But look it up. There are research done that suggests that it isn't actually bad at all.
I feel better in the Vive than I feel looking at a computer screen. So that's just my personal experience.
I would temper that, though. Of course, you don't want your kids to be watching screens at all for a huge amount of time, even though I do myself. But yeah, I do think for development, you shouldn't have screens that are that close for a whole
day?
For a whole day.
So I should get out of the Vive? No. Is that what you told me? But
I do want to talk a little bit about the R&D. And there's research going on about how VR can be used to correct vision within the game. Like automatically check your eyes and then set them so that you don't need prescription lenses. And even further than that, folks that are vision impaired, correcting for that so that they can enjoy a VR experience. So there's a lot of research going on in this.
There was a Danish company, iTribe, that was acquired by Facebook recently, and they're doing parts of that. So it's an eye tracking company, and literally for VR, that was their focus, and then they got acquired. So it's going to be very interesting, especially for people like me who sometimes have to wear glasses in VR. If I could avoid that, if whatever device I'm using would actually just correct it for me, then it's going to be even more pleasant.
I think as a game developer, probably what you can do or think about doing is design the game in a way that doesn't force the player to play for a very long time. Our philosophy has been around that, so short bursts of gameplay rather than very long ones. Like in our car racing game, and the longest track, you think it's a minute, and then that's it, you finish the track. We don't want people to stay very, very long in VR because of these issues and concerns. That's something maybe you can consider as a game developer, but I think that will always be there. Like it was mentioned when TVs came along, when smartphones came along, you will always have people that will tell you it's bad for your health. It's not also for everyone, but as a developer, you can maybe minimize that by focusing on maybe shorter gameplay sessions.
I kind of disagree with the shorter gameplay sessions thing, but I just wanted to say I want to support the Vive and give a negative shout out to Oculus and Gear because they have this distortion on the lenses. It's so annoying. When you put on the Gear, at least, and you move your head and try to focus on one object, you can see the distortion.
You can see
is
the
really
distortion
bad, and I
in
think
the
that
upper
can probably
30%.
ruin your. If it doesn't ruin your eyes, it ruins your brain. With the Vive, it's very flat.
I honestly get motion sick from Oculus because of distortion in the upper field, and it's very visible to me.
But regarding the short gameplay thing, we were talking about mobile versus VR and the cost for mobile playing. You pick up the phone, you play when you're in the toilet or something, quick and dirty. Well, don't play dirty in the toilet. But with VR, it's a bit of an extra cost. You have to set up the thing, you have to put on the Vive.
It depends what kind of VR.
If it's mobile, you still have a bit of an extra cost. So I think it's also justifiable to say, if people will go through the effort of putting on their headset and setting up the thing, especially now in the early days when it's so clunky to go through the menus and stuff, find the game, start it up, it's loading because devices are still pretty bad at loading cool graphics, then it's also viable to do a longer experience, which we don't really have many of.
Will you end on that note?
What do you think?
I think we're in early days and people are going for long experiences in VR. That's maybe the way to go, but from our perspective, we think it's better to have shorter sessions and iterate faster, maybe get people to play more, get used to more things, rather than you have to sit and play for an hour. I've never played more than 15 minutes in VR. I'm a game developer in VR, and after 10-15 minutes I start feeling really, really tired and a little bit sick. So
I played hours in Minecraft on the Vive, so that's a different experience.
I'm impressed.
I do like the idea of fast iterations, especially from a development point of view. We try to do that as much as possible, iterate maybe in a day. If you can't prototype the mechanic in a day, then it's change it, do something else.
So I want to end up on the note on like concern about the eyes. We actually had a selfie tennis player who couldn't, because he had an eye problem, he couldn't see the ball in selfie tennis. So we made a specific cheat for him to put this like black sphere around it, so it was easier for him to see, to compensate for his eyesight. And there are many things you can do. And of course, like we do have to be concerned with kids and all of us when playing VR, and as we mentioned the Oculus, yes, unfortunately, like I get motion sick from it because of the upper third part, and that's just not good. But I know that like so much research is being put in this field right now, also with regards to resolution, everything, making sure everything is tracked. So hopefully, like the next generation of VR will be better compensating for these aspects. I think we're out of time, right?
Yes, sadly that's time. But yeah, let's give all of our panelists and obviously our wonderful moderator a big round of applause. And